Rey is at the end of seven. She's kind of been thrown into this big adventure. She's been sent on this mission to find Luke. She has this kind of, desire for connection to her past and some notion that there are answers there that she can get. I think she probably expects there are some answers about who she, and that's really what she is on a quest to kind of find out who she is and how she fits into this story. And who she is, not just meaning like who are her parents, where does she come from, but meaning like really what is she going to be going forward? What's her place in all of this? And I think she's expecting when she shows up on that island, there's part of her and there's a big part of us that expects that she's going to get that from Luke. Kylo was a really that was the character that I was most excited about getting into and writing and coming out of the Force Awakens, seeing that character and because in the first Star Wars films, Vader was a great villain, but he was never someone that you identified with. You identified with Luke's relationship to him. So Vader was, he was the monster. And then he was the scary father, and then he was the father you had to reconcile with. He was kind of an outside force, whereas, especially in the context of these stories being about, the transition from adolescence into adulthood. So you're identifying with Luke. He's the one going through that transition, and Vader is something he essentially has to navigate to get there. Whereas with Kylo is not really that for Rey. It's almost like Rey and Kylo are two halves of the protagonist. Rey the dark or Rey the light and Kylo the dark. And Kylo, again, this is all about the transition from adolescence into adulthood. Kylo is that anger of adolescence and wanting to reject your parents and wanting to break away and wanting to, that, which I think to some extent all of us can identify with, as much as we can identify with the hopeful Rey looking up at the stars from her planet, and that is thrilling to me. That's my favorite kind of bad guy, are the ones that you identify with. And in this case, in a way, you identify with him as much as you do Rey. The theme of mentors runs through this whole series, and to me, it made a lot of sense that Leia would be that to Poe. If Leia is the general in charge of the Resistance, her ace pilot is Poe, and he's a great Star Wars character in Seven, but there's not a ton of conflict. He's pretty, he comes in, you know who he is because he's an awesome Star Wars pilot, and it's perfect, and you love him from the get-go. But with this, I wanted to dig in and kind of push him a little more and put him in a tough spot and kind of test his mettle a little bit. So, and he and Leia kind of parallel and very, very different, but the same way that Luke and Rey play off each other, Leia and Poe play off each other during the course of the film. Han was, had a little bit of a scoundrel to him. Poe is much more of he's got kind of a reckless brashness, but it's like the can't be touched fighter pilot from the old war movies. It's that kind of gleam in the eye, almost idealistic hero brashness, I guess. Which is instantly endearing, and which I couldn't wait to get in and start poking at. Andy Serkis plays him, and it was my first time working with Andy. It was my first time really working with a motion capture character. Snoke is entirely CG, and it's built from Andy's mocap performance. Andy wears a suit, and similar to the way he did with Caesar in the Apes movies, and what he did in Seven. And Andy's extraordinary. And for the longest time in the cut, we just left Andy in the mocap suit in there because just seeing him perform, we were mesmerized just watching his face. It's only very recently that we've started getting the final effect shots in from ILM where we're like, okay, it's time to put the real Snoke in the movie. But having watched Andy's performance over and over, it's incredible seeing what ILM has done in capturing that performance in this animated character. It's magical. Having grown up with those original movies, or especially, that's a big part of what defines this world, is the feeling that you could reach out and touch anything in it, the feeling that it feels like, grimy and kind of real and tactile. And not to, and that in addition to the incredible work that ILM does, because there's still, even given that, there's a tremendous amount of CG in the movie, both in terms of environments and creatures and everything. So you combine the tactile real sets that we're building with the magic that Ben Morris, our ILM supervisor, and his whole team can do, and that's when it really starts feeling special. Neil Scanlon, who ran the creature department and was in charge of all the practical creatures, he had a huge task on this movie. We created a lot of creatures, especially for the casino sequence on Canto Bight. To go into his workshop and it's like walking into Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. It was my favorite place to go and review stuff because his team would design these creatures with sketches, and then we would land on a design, and then to translate those into first a sculpture and then a working puppet that actually physically, could operate, and that you could get like 6 inches from, be looking into its eyes, and it looked like a real living creature. It was just absolutely extraordinary.